Your legs feel like they belong to someone else. That's the first real signal, though you won't clock it as a signal. You'll clock it as being tired. Because it's 94 degrees, and you've been working for 2 hours, and of course, your legs feel heavy. You reach for your water bottle. You drink. It doesn't help, and that fact alone should scare you more than it does. Your skin is slick, soaked through, dripping off your chin onto the ground. And somewhere in the next few minutes, without any warning bell going off, that sweat is going to stop. Not slow down. Stop. And when it does, your body has quietly made a decision. It did not ask your permission for. It has given up trying to cool you down. Your internal thermostat, the one that has kept you at a stable 98.6 for every single day of your life, is now reading your actual temperature as fine, even as it climbs past 104, past 106, past the point where the proteins that make up your muscle tissue start to behave like egg whites in a frying pan. Hollywood has a very specific image for this. A man crawling across sand dunes, lips cracked, mumbling about water, sweat pouring down his face right up until he collapses dramatically in the shade of a dying cactus. It's a great visual. It's also almost the exact opposite of what actually kills people. Real heat stroke doesn't usually happen in a desert, and it does not look like a man begging for water under a blazing sun while soaked to the bone. It happens on a practice field in Minnesota in July. It happens in a parked car in a grocery store lot. It happens to a healthy 27-year-old professional athlete in full pads. And the single most dangerous moment isn't when he's drenched in sweat. It's the moment the sweating stops entirely, his skin goes hot and dry, and nobody standing 3 feet away realizes that's the worst possible sign a body can give. Let's talk about what your body is actually built to do, because it's a genuinely elegant system until it isn't. Your hypothalamus, a small structure deep in your brain about the size of an almond, functions as your body's thermostat. Under normal conditions, when your internal temperature rises even slightly, it sends a signal down to roughly 2 to 4 million sweat glands across your skin, and those glands push fluid to the surface where it evaporates and pulls heat away with it. This is why a fan works. This is why sweating in dry Arizona heat feels almost tolerable, while sweating in humid Georgia heat feels like drowning standing up. Evaporation is the mechanism. Humidity is the enemy of that mechanism because when the air is already saturated with moisture, your sweat has nowhere to go. It just sits on your skin doing nothing while your core keeps climbing. Before any of that happens, there's a stage most people walk right through without noticing, called heat exhaustion, and it comes with its own strange little betrayal. Chills. Real teeth-chattering goosebumps while your skin is burning to the touch. This happens because your blood vessels near the surface are so dilated trying to dump heat that your brain briefly misreads the situation and thinks you're cold. You'll also get cramping in your calves and abdomen as your muscles run low on sodium and potassium from all that sweat you've already lost, along with nausea that feels exactly like the flu. This stage is reversible in minutes with shade, fluids, and rest. It is also the last stage where your judgment is still fully intact enough to make that call for yourself, which is exactly why it gets ignored so often. At around 104 degrees Fahrenheit, you cross out of heat exhaustion, which is unpleasant but survivable and reversible, into heat stroke, which is a different animal entirely. Your central nervous system starts to misfire. This is where the personality changes begin, and they are almost always noticed by someone else before they're noticed by you. You get irritable, confused. You might snap at a teammate for no reason, or laugh at something that isn't funny, or ask the same question twice in a row. Your judgment, the part of your brain that would normally tell you to sit down and drink water, is one of the first things to go dark, which is the cruelest part of this particular death. The exact moment you most need to recognize danger is the exact moment your brain loses the ability to recognize it. Underneath all of that, at the cellular level, something much stranger is happening. Every cell in your body relies on proteins folded into very specific three-dimensional shapes to function, the way a key only works if it's cut into the right shape. Heat unfolds those shapes. This is called protein denaturation, and it's the same basic chemistry that turns a clear, liquid egg white into a solid white mass when you fry it. Your cells have a defense system for this, a rescue crew of molecules called heat shock proteins, HSP70 being the most important one, whose entire job is to grab onto proteins as they start to unfold and hold them in place until things cool down. At normal fever temperatures, this rescue crew keeps up. Past 106, 107 degrees, sustained for more than a few minutes, the rescue crew is simply outnumbered. Proteins denature faster than they can be saved. Cell membranes destabilize, and cells across your body, especially in your gut, liver, kidneys, and brain, begin to die. Here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the part that turns this from a heat problem into something that looks disturbingly like sepsis. As your temperature climbs, your body redirects blood away from your intestines and toward your skin and muscles, trying desperately to dump heat at the surface. Your gut lining, starved of its normal blood supply, starts to break down at the cellular level. The tight junctions between the cells lining your intestines The seals that normally keep gut bacteria exactly where they belong loosen and fail. Bacterial toxins, most notably something called endotoxin, leak directly into your bloodstream. Your immune system responds to this exactly the way it would respond to a full-blown bacterial infection. Because as far as your immune system is concerned, that's precisely what just happened. It floods your system with inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines, and you develop what is functionally a systemic inflammatory response, indistinguishable in your blood work from a person dying of septic shock. You are, at this point, not just overheating. You're being poisoned by your own digestive tract from the inside in real time. Meanwhile, your muscle tissue, especially if you've been exercising, is breaking down directly from the heat and the exertion combined, a process called rhabdomyolysis. Muscle cells rupture and dump a protein called myoglobin into your bloodstream. And myoglobin is toxic to your kidneys in large quantities. It clogs the tiny filtering tubes inside them the way sludge clogs a drain pipe. This is why heat stroke patients often produce urine that looks like weak tea or dark cola, and it is one of the clearest signs in hindsight that this was never just dehydration. Your blood itself starts turning against you. The combination of heat damage, inflammation, and dying cells everywhere activates your clotting system inappropriately, triggering something called disseminated intravascular coagulation, where tiny clots form throughout your smallest blood vessels, while, at the very same time, your body's clotting factors get used up faster than your liver can replace them. You end up clotting and bleeding simultaneously in different parts of your body at the same time, which is about as much of a contradiction as human physiology is capable of producing. Your brain, denied stable blood flow and cooking in place, begins to swell. This is cerebral edema, and it explains the terrifying behavioral shift that often marks the point of no return. The mild confusion from earlier becomes something closer to delirium. You might become combative. You might hallucinate. Athletes in this state have been documented trying to keep playing, insisting they're fine, physically fighting off teammates and trainers trying to help them, because the part of the brain responsible for recognizing you're in danger has already been compromised by the swelling. Seizures often follow, then coma. Your heart, meanwhile, dealing with dropping blood pressure, electrolyte chaos, and direct thermal damage to its own muscle tissue, starts to beat irregularly. Arrhythmias stacking on top of each other, until it simply can't maintain a rhythm compatible with keeping you alive. Death from heat stroke is usually a final cascading failure of multiple organs at once, kidneys, liver, brain, and heart, all collapsing within a similar window, rather than one single dramatic moment. Your body doesn't die of heat exactly. It dies of being cooked from the inside, while simultaneously being poisoned by its own gut and drowned in its own inflammatory response. And the truly damning fact, the one that should make you angry on behalf of the people this has happened to, is that every single part of this cascade is set in motion by a delay of somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. On August 1st, 2001, a 27-year-old offensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings named Korey Stringer died from exactly this sequence. He was a Pro Bowl lineman, 6'4", 335 pounds, and what everyone around him described as the best shape of his career. Training camp that July was brutal, a heat index nearing triple digits, and on the day before his collapse, he had already vomited multiple times during practice. A textbook early warning sign that his team's own doctors, by later admission, simply didn't treat with the urgency it deserved. He pushed through it anyway, in full pads, because that is what football culture in that era demanded of its players. The next morning, in another full pads practice in the same brutal heat, he collapsed. By the time he reached the hospital, his core temperature was recorded above 108 degrees. Doctors who reviewed the case afterward were blunt about the timeline. Exertional heat stroke is considered close to 100% survivable if a patient's temperature is brought back under 104 degrees within 30 minutes of collapse. Stringer wasn't aggressively cooled in that window. He died early the next morning. His death didn't just end a career. It rewrote how the NFL, the NCAA, and eventually high schools across the country handle heat, hydration, and two-a-day practices. And an institute now bears his name specifically to keep athletes from dying of something that, as his own case proved in the most devastating way possible, is almost entirely preventable if you act in time. So here's your window, and unlike most of the deaths we cover on this channel, this one comes with genuinely good odds if you move fast. The single most important number to remember is 30. If cooling begins within 30 minutes of collapse and gets core temperature under 104 degrees, survival approaches nearly 100%. Every minute after that, the odds fall. So the moment you notice someone stops sweating while their skin is hot, flushed, and dry, or the moment someone becomes confused, irritable, or disoriented in serious heat, you are not looking at someone who needs to walk it off. You call emergency services immediately, and then you start cooling before help arrives, because the ambulance ride itself can cost you the window that matters most. The gold standard, confirmed repeatedly in sports medicine research, is cold water immersion, not a damp towel, not a fan. A tub, a kiddie pool, a horse trough, anything you can fill with ice water and submerge the person's torso in, because this cools core temperature roughly twice as fast as any other method available outside a hospital. If immersion isn't possible, the next best option is aggressive evaporative cooling. Strip away excess clothing and equipment, douse the skin in cool water continuously, and fan it hard to maximize evaporation, while packing ice or cold packs at the neck, armpits, and groin, where major blood vessels sit close to the skin surface and can carry cooled blood back toward the core efficiently. What you should not do is hand someone a water bottle and consider the job done. By the time someone is confused or has stopped sweating, drinking water addresses a problem this isn't. This isn't a hydration problem anymore. It's a cooling emergency, and the clock that matters is the one counting how fast you can physically drop that internal temperature, not how much fluid you can get someone to swallow. Research coming directly out of the Korey Stringer Institute, the organization his death created, backs a specific detail that runs against instinct. Full torso and limb immersion beats targeted ice packs by a wide margin, because you're cooling blood as it circulates through your entire body rather than trying to chase heat at a few isolated points. If a full tub genuinely isn't available, even partial immersion, hips and legs in a trash can full of ice water while you continue dousing the chest and back is dramatically better than ice packs alone. And stay with the person. Confusion at this stage can flip into combativeness without warning, and someone in the grip of heat stroke delirium may fight the exact people trying to save them, which is disorienting to witness, but is itself just one more symptom, not a sign they're somehow fine. There's a dry irony here. Football culture has spent decades rewarding the exact instinct that gets people killed by this. So if you're the kind of person who prides himself on gutting things out, this is the one situation where gutting it out is a documented way to die of your own gut turning against you. Stop moving. Get cold, fast, and get cold before you're impressive about it. Subscribe if you want to know exactly how fast the next one gets you, because next time, staying tough isn't even on the table.